right, everybody. So today, back on the podcast, Alex Leonidas. How we doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you, Dave?
I'm good. So we were just saying, you're looking pretty shredded over there.
Yeah, I'm weighing in at 157, so not that far off from last year's cut. Basically shredded. I wouldn't say comp ready, but let's say 9% or so, max 10%. Like this is no pump, no special lighting. You
Yeah,
see the veins, the separation. Like I'm feeling good at this weight, and I
yeah.
can probably maintain it if I don't shred into deeper territories. Although I'm a little bit crazy, always wanting more.
Was your competition 2 years ago now?
Yeah, it was 2023. Crazy how
Wow.
fast that passed by.
Okay. So last year you got very lean, but you didn't go all the way to contest lean, and now you're kind of back to that leanness again.
Exactly. And what you notice is that every pound of fat loss you lose at this point is very noticeable. So
Yeah,
last year I got down to 154 body weight, whereas for my competition, it was 149, 150 ish. So that's like 4 or 5 pounds difference. But just off that, it takes you to the final layers of shreddedness where you really see striations everywhere and you just look like a freak. And that's when you feel like garbage.
yeah,
It's
sure.
not right before that tipping point. So that's where I'm at right now. And compared to last year, I don't think I gained more. I talked about this in a recent Instagram post, but I don't think I gained more than a pound of muscle. And that's after going through another year long bulk. So I bulk and cut every single year. And this is the first time in my lifting journey where I can honestly say it was minuscule. And that's
Yeah,
kind of disheartening to me because
sure.
it's lean mass, but once you've been training for this amount of time, it is what it is. You just got to accept it.
Yeah, so honestly, this is obviously something I talked a lot about on the channel, and I have a post I just made this morning, and it was actually basically just showing Johnny Candido's recent video. I actually don't know if I've ever made a post that has this much engagement this quickly. Not in terms of likes, but comments. It's, like for me, I think probably the most in a short period of time. And it was basically he put a video out saying, "Is being natural actually worth it?" And the quote that I had put in there from him is, "I don't understand how people just train for hypertrophy for 30 years, and then by the time they're 40, just knowing they're not going to put an ounce of muscle on their body, they continue on the same routine. I think that is a mistake and such a redundant waste of time." And he goes, obviously, that it's a
Hmm.
nuanced video. It's like over 20 minutes long. And
Yeah.
because it's just that quote, a lot of people in the comments were like disagreeing, but in reality, they weren't disagreeing. They just didn't understand the nuance of the post because they were like, oh no, people live for health and people live for these other things. And it's like, yeah, he wasn't saying there's no reason to lift at that point. He's saying if you are specifically just focused on bodybuilding, it's all bodybuilding 24/7, that's your life, and you're natural and you're doing that after you're like 40 plus. If you started like when we did, like as teenagers,
Hmm.
yeah, again, if you're competing, that's one thing. If this is how you make money, that's one thing. But I gotta say, like, if the goal is just like I could see, and I'm somebody who's like very dedicated, very conscientious, very much just on a routine. At some point, you're like, bro, like this is boring because nothing is actually happening. We're
Yeah.
stimulated by progress, and so and what he had recommended, and I don't think you have to go exactly this way, but he had recommended, hey, start with like a general foundation of strength. If you're going to do powerlifting, you can focus on that from like 18 to 31 was his age. Then you can kind of veer off and do more of like the bodybuilding thing. And honestly, Alex, this is pretty much what you did, right? All this strength stuff, maxing it
Hmm.
out. And now there's the bodybuilding journey. And then I was just talking with Jeffrey Schofield about that. Maybe when he's done, maybe it's the calisthenics journey or something. But there is a point where it's like, bro, like he can't just do the same thing forever most of the time.
No, you're going to go crazy. And that's kind of why I always had workout ADHD and doing a lot of exercises because I honestly get bored doing the same stuff. And that's kind of what we saw with a lot of powerlifting channels who talk so much about high specificity training. Just squat, bench press, deadlift, making a bunch of videos on the same topics over and over again. And that's all you see in the workout vlogs. People get tired of seeing it and you get tired of training in that way. And what's the next thing? Am I going to go from a 405 bench to a 440 bench? How many years is that going to take? What bulk am I going to have to go through to get that done? What about potential injuries along the way? Will I even, is that going to matter more than being healthier and looking amazing? How many additional pounds of muscle will you put on in that time frame when you started lifting at 15 years old and now you're 30 plus? It's such diminishing returns that you kind of have to change your focus to a certain extent. And this is, I know Johnny just released a video And I still have to come up with more things because even I want to discuss it further. But
So you saw the video already.
yeah, I saw the video. I
Okay.
saw your post. Lots of nuance there for sure. And I agree. I think the takeaway is you need to have different goals that's not just bodybuilding, unless you're specifically competing like a Jeff Alberts type of guy and you
Right.
work with athletes who are also trying to make it to the world stage, because ultimately your progress is going to be so slow that you will lose your mind in many cases. And um man, this is fresh to me. This is like I'm just processing this right now. It's like me. I just mentioned I gained maybe a pound of muscle in the last year or so. It sucks. It's slow. And I'm a full-time fitness influencer who can sleep as much as he wants, have the perfect diet, literally walk down the stairs and work out in my home gym, and the gains are still that slow. So imagine the average person who doesn't have all these things working for him, and he's also put in a decade plus into lifting. The gains are going to be even slower, if not inexistent. So you kind of have to change your priorities to some extent. And most of the time, that's going to oftentimes be downgrading your physique, at least from a body fat standpoint. We've all seen the classic, like Alan Thrall kind of lifters who they were bulked up, maybe in the 200s for years, 25% body fat with their highest absolute strength. Then they cut down to 15%. They're feeling better. They take it down another notch, 12%, and the relative strength just explodes in a sense, but they can no longer lift what they used to on, say, squat, bench press, deadlift. And that's something that they accept because the trade off of being healthier, feeling better, and being able to excel in other departments is more rewarding. And again, that's where you can start playing around with things like calisthenics. So, or like more endurance type training. But if all you're going to be is this big bulk guy, you're really limiting what you could do. And for what? To further accelerate the rate of aging. I know we talked about this in the last podcast, I believe, but dirty bulking and going through these bulks in general, where you're going to put on 30 pounds of fat, then to lose it all to gain such small amounts of muscle is not really worth it when you're in your 30s and beyond, or even late 20s if you started when you're young, because ultimately it boils down to your training age. And depending how well you optimize all your factors, you can peak out quite soon. I don't
Yeah.
think guys realize that, but even the journey from 20 years old up to 30 years old, that's a 10-year span. You do that right, especially with today's information. You follow guys like us, like you're gaining most of your muscle, at least 90%, if you ask me.
Yeah.
And it is real, and we don't want to admit it, but like, there's always this talk about the natural limit. Well, let's say it doesn't exist. Okay. Let's say it's just so it's like a theoretical limit kind of thing, right? It might as well exist in the sense that you're going to be so close to it that it won't even matter. That's kind
Right.
of what you go through after a certain point.
Yeah. And
And
I agree
when you
with
hit
that.
that, you got to reevaluate, like, what's the next step? And what I'm seeing with powerlifters is they do Brazilian jiu-jitsu. That seems to be the stereotypical move. I don't know why
Mhm.
that sport in particular,
Definitely the last five,
as
ten
well
years.
as
Yeah.
yeah, as well as the six-pack era. But that's why I know I'm rambling all over the place, but you can't just be a hypertrophy bro. You can't just be an SBD bro. I think a more generalist approach, like what I advocate in my videos, you're jacked, you excel at everything. That's a much more sustainable route, and it's how you're going to last 10 plus years in the game. And when your life priorities change, when you've established yourself, you know what you're about. You might not care about being the biggest guy like you used to, and that's another reason why you're going to want to stay natural as well. Because
Yeah.
it's really these people who obsess about having these massive physiques. It's usually guys in their early 20s or late teens, and they want things now. But when you put in over a decade of training and you put on the majority of the muscle that you realistically acquire, it's like, I'm jacked enough. You don't really care to be that much bigger. And because your life priorities are different, it's like, why the hell would I get enhanced now?
Right.
Some
Well,
guys,
that's
it's
the
like,
thing.
okay, I
It's like
paid
by
my
the
dues,
time,
now I could do it. So that kind of like the Greg Doucette archetypes, right?
yeah,
But I think most guys are not going to do it. You know, if you look like GVS at 36 years old, it's like, okay, I'm pretty happy, you know,
yeah, yeah.
and you won't mind transitioning to something else.
That's the thing. It's like you can say like, hey, wait to be enhanced and wait until you've paid your dues. But the reality is by the time you've actually paid your dues, but if you're like 28 to 32 and maybe you're in a stable relationship, you got your career, like most of the time, it's not that I'm saying people are going to stop caring about lifting, but you're just going to have a different perspective, especially if you have kids, but even if you don't, like it's just going to be like am I like that now? I want to put on 30 pounds of muscle. Like, and maybe obviously plenty of people do it, but I think like if you actually took all the people who had a strong temptation from like 18 to 22, which is basically almost
Hmm.
all lifters, it's a very small percentage that by the time they're 30 are going to be like, okay, now I'm going to jump on.
Exactly. And if that's the inevitable future, if the majority of lifters will, that's their conclusion, then that means by default, the majority of people shouldn't even consider taking even the smallest amount of steroids because they'll be happy anyway if they just dedicate themselves to 10 years. It's
Sure,
just that they're not aware of that immediately. It's in hindsight, it's upon realization that, oh, wow, I made the right move. And we're starting to see that now. Guys saying, oh, wow, I'm so happy I stayed natural. Especially when you start comparing yourself to your peers who look
sure.
significantly older than you. And
Yeah, well,
now they
that's the thing.
have
As
to
you
get
get
off,
older, yeah, your
right?
relative physique compared to your peers is definitely, goes up.
You look better than everybody else. You still have your health intact. And best of all, most of the time, you don't need TRT because you didn't take a bunch of stuff in your 20s and you didn't have
Yeah,
to go through that transitioning phase. But it's shocking to me how many steroid users look really old in the
yeah,
face. I don't know what it does to them. And even it's like their face changes. It gets this bloated appearance. Even
sure.
at a low body fat, just their neck, it looks off. And these guys are like 25 years old and they look 35. And that's not something you can undo, I think.
There
So
was somebody I saw
maybe a little
recently.
bit, but
He somebody I saw recently where I don't know who this was. He wasn't like an IPB pro level, but anyway, clearly enhanced. And you were looking at him, he was like, shredded, and obviously there's many examples like this, but I just thought if you put this guy's face on an obese body, you wouldn't think it was out of place. You know what I mean?
wow.
Like it would look appropriate on like you don't I don't think it was the first thing I noticed, but when you actually kind of like zoom in and take a look, you're like, yeah, like your face is kind of fat. And I say as somebody who like naturally stores more fat in my face, but it's not like, the levels I used to see with some of
Not
these
like
people.
that.
But it's funny, like with the natural thing, for some reason I thought maybe I'm misremembering. I thought you were one of the people who said, hey, I don't think there is a natural limit, or maybe you do, and now obviously there's the nuance to it. But
Well,
yeah, but I was
sorry,
just
you
gonna
can go
say,
on.
like Steve Hall made that post recently where Menno Henselmans talked about the natural limit, and Menno said that he felt he was at his natural limit, and Steve Hall talked about that. But I think most of us, if we actually have a conversation and we don't just make a post about it, we're saying the same thing. Whether you say it exists or it doesn't, effectively it exists. So it's,
Yeah, it's just the interpretation of it. It's just mental masturbation, the way we're
sure,
verbalizing it. But we all end up at this point, and I've said this for years. Like you take all the best natural bodybuilders or just the guys in this online space and you line them up side by side, and most of them will have a pretty comparable physique. What makes a difference is honestly just their genetics.
yeah,
That'll affect, if the guy has 10 pounds of muscle over you or just the symmetry that he has. But we tend to see similar endpoints. Like we have a pretty
sure,
good idea of what's obtainable. And even looking at the last 10 years in the competitive space, I'm not really seeing big improvements. But
yeah,
again, these guys still made gains. Like the case of, Alberto Nunez, for example. I believe he's 40 or 41 now. And he made gains in his lats in the last 3 years. But it's not a game changer. Like if you would take his competitive physique from even closer to a decade ago, he would still fare similarly, if you ask me. So we're talking about like you're adding minute refinements. It's like, okay, a little bit more side delt, a bit more upper chest, a bit more calf. It's like you're scraping. And that you can say that's your limit, quote unquote. But it's not, it's just
yeah.
it's just close to it. So it's just the way we verbalize it. But
Well, and people, I
that's
think
why I say
also.
Yeah.
I think people also consistently kind of miscategorize and overstate how much doing more is going to actually make a difference. And what I mean by that is, somebody said to Menno in this post, "Oh, Menno, like you think you're at your natural max? Have you been training your forearms ideally for 15 years?" Like as if, no, that kind of stuff is going to make the big difference. It's like, no, that is ridiculous. Let me tell you what's going to happen in this situation. He has been training his back and biceps. He's going to crazy volumes and all these things. Could he maybe gain an ounce of muscle across both forearms if he started doing even more? And I think he probably has done some direct work for them. Even more direct work? Probably, but it's not like, oh, if you haven't been lifting it, that one muscle now gets
Yeah.
10 years of gains. It's
It's
like
not
when
gonna
I started,
explode.
right. It's like when I started training neck. I didn't train neck for like 12 years. Then I started directly training neck. I gained an inch and then it also maintained. So if you were
Hmm.
never training forearms, but you're doing back and biceps for 2 decades, maybe you're going to get a quarter inch and then it's going to maintain. So
I
it's,
agree.
so like it's the same kind of
I,
general argument when people say on the same topic, oh, well, see, the people who really got to the top, that's why they're there. And it's like, no, man, like if Alex Leonidas today stops focusing on hypertrophy training, but still trains heavy, hard, all these other stuff, but just not bodybuilding specific, and his twin just does only hypertrophy training for the next 10, 20 years, the difference might be like half a pound of muscle or something. Like people just they put these overemphasizing statements on the difference there is what I'm saying.
yeah, it's not gonna be the deal breaker. The only time we can make exceptions is for genuinely untrained muscles
Yeah.
like the calves. Because I think most lifters are far from their potential, myself included. I can probably gain another 2 or 3 inches easily, but that's on me due to my own laziness. But muscles that have indirect stimulation, it's like, do these people honestly think that, for example, guys like Menno or other influencers haven't tried this shit? Like, we've all been training for a similar time frame, let's say 15 years or so. Believe you me, we've experimented with lower volume, higher frequency, various splits, various exercise selection, and not just like short term, but we're talking many months, sometimes years. And it's like if we found this magical secret, like we'd be raving about it like there was no tomorrow.
Have you
But
trained your calves directly, Alex?
barely. I'm a novice when it comes to calf training, so I can admit that I have significant potential,
What do they measure now, roughly, if you know?
like 15 and a half, if that.
So I'm one who believes that like direct training certainly will do something, but I've had my experiments and everything I talked about. If you can put on 2 inches to your calves in at the same body weight, I'll Venmo
Mm,
you $200 because
okay, okay.
I just don't think like because of all the squats. I don't know if you do any cardio, but
I
I
do.
just so you're getting that indirect. I think my experiment right. I didn't train one calf for three
Yes, yes, you
years, no
told me all
change.
about that.
I'm not saying you're not going to make any progress on it, but at the same body weight, again, the calves probably more than anything already gets that stimulation from the walking and you've bulked up over years and everything like that. So I'm not trying to hate. I'm just giving the
Yeah,
example.
we
I like,
we could
just
say that, but I don't think that squats and deadlifts make a difference in that regard. And if we're talking about endurance work through cardio, you're not really activating the high threshold motor units. It's just the low threshold because you're so far away from failure. So if you never punish your calves to that extent, then I don't think the indirect work would make a difference. Whereas for something like pull-ups and rows, talking about the forearms, you could have a significantly higher proximity to failure. Like maybe your back was at 0 reps in reserve, but your forearms were like at 4 reps in reserve, or maybe 3 reps in reserve if there's like a bit of an imbalance there. So that would add up. Um,
on
but the
paper,
calves,
I
I don't see
totally
that.
agree with you. Like
Yeah,
that, and that's kind of been my whole discussion. It's like you would think that, right? Cardio isn't pushing them at all. Like I totally get that. What I'll tell you is from when they started at 11 inches with just my normal training and everything, it was 11 to like
right.
15. And then just literally not training it for 3 years, it dropped maybe an eighth of an inch. So that's
Yeah,
why, I mean, I would love to see more people. I really would love to see more people experiment with it and literally not train at all and then train. For sure, there would be differences. I'm not trying to say it doesn't do anything and genetic response and all that stuff. But I do think that calves more than anything. I mean, again, just look around the world, right? calves is the one
Sure.
thing you see so many untrained people with crazy development. How does that
Yeah.
happen? So anyway, that would be
Yeah. My
my
uh my dad doesn't even train calves, and they might be 18 or 19 inches.
yeah.
Uh I wish I had his genetics. It's not fair being his son, but all he does is walk, right?
Yeah.
And he has a messed up knee. They're still jacked.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So yeah,
crazy.
I would agree. It is that one. I would say calves and forearms, but more so calves.
Yeah.
It's like guys ask me all the time, "What do I do for my forearms? What's my secret?" Yeah, sure. I talked about arm wrestling specialization techniques. That
All right.
works, but really, it's just indirect work through pull-ups, and I have a short forearm bone, and it
Mhm.
seems to be a muscle that responds very well. And I always feel them working when I do my curls and my
Yeah.
compounds, and I don't have to isolate my forearms. If I never isolate them again, they're still going to be huge.
Yeah.
That's genetics. I can admit that, you know. But in the case of guys who've tried everything and they're still not growing, it's like you're not going to find some magical exercise that's going to change anything.
Yeah.
The only magical exercise I can think of, and it's not even magic, it's just something that changed the game for me, was the chest expander for my rear delts. I can
Mm.
say definitively that when I started using that, my rear delts exploded. And I
Interesting.
specifically noticed that on the back double bicep shot. But again, maybe I could have gotten better results if I just trained my reverse pec decks at the gym harder. Maybe the dumbbell version just wasn't enough for me.
Yeah.
But, you know, or the super wide grip pull ups, that gave me a second wave of puberty in my lats. Good mornings. They allow
Yeah, I
me to
want to talk
get
about those
more or
too.
less
Yeah.
weight for my posterior chain, but that was more of a fatigue management issue. Not that I couldn't get, like, my legs aren't that much bigger than when I was just doing regular deadlifts and RDLs. They're not. It's just I corrected my spinal rector weakness. It had good carryover from a strength perspective. But you look at me before I started doing all these good mornings, and my legs are similarly sized. I just, you know, got a bit stronger in some respects. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it's we're not talking massive differences when you make these changes. It's just something that it adds that
Little
extra
tweaks.
wow factor.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
let's talk about those Weicker pull-ups because actually I started doing them a little bit after I saw your video, and obviously we've had many discussions on pull-ups before. So you just hit what was it two something
210 on the weighted pull
210?
up.
Okay, which is crazy. And what was your grip for that?
I think it was a close neutral or a medium neutral. I don't
Okay,
remember which one.
gotcha. Yeah, I like the medium neutral a little more. I have two squat racks in my basement, and there's no like perfect grip, but the one I tend to do more is a little bit narrower than I'd like, but it's still good. But where would you say? Because I know you said you want to get 5 plates. Is that right for your goal?
Yeah, 5 plays 400 max. Just to say I hit the ultimate 100 kilo mark, you know?
Yeah, yeah, man, that's so much. Um, I never hit the one arm pull up, and I debate if I should go for it or not. Now that I'm living leaner, and I might maybe just cut down a little bit lower. But
What are you at right now?
weight wise.
Yes.
So weight wise, I'm around like 182, and it's definitely that territory where we talk, where every pound makes a big difference. And it's pretty crazy too, because if anybody is similarly hairy to me, the difference
Oh,
between a couple pounds and shaving is like 4% body fat. I mean, literally at like
yeah.
182, if I have a little bit of like a, cheat meal the day before and I haven't shaved in a while, I'm like, dude, I look like 13, 14%, whereas my
Yeah,
real body fat right now is probably around 10%. But I mean, it's such a big
bro.
difference.
I just went through that today. I'm looking at myself. I'm like, damn. I'm looking lean, but I feel like I'm closer to 12% or so. I shave off the body hair. Oh yeah, I'm like 9%.
Yeah,
It's
it's crazy.
enormous, especially when you grow hair fast and you're Mediterranean. Yeah, you got to get rid of that body. When you're barren mode, it has the opposite effect. It creates like a cross hatching effect, makes you look leaner because it kind of adds like shading to your
Yeah,
body.
I do prefer to stay. Yeah, that is kind of true. Like, I think it's just ultimately the shaving is showing what's really there, and if what's really there
Yes,
is kind of fat, then it's great to
then it
cover it
makes it look
up.
worse. But if you have
Yeah,
striations and vascularity,
yeah,
it was covered up, and it's especially the striations. When you go under downlighting, the shaving hide the body hair hides everything. Like
yeah,
I completely agree. It's a couple percentage points difference.
yeah. It is
But
crazy.
yeah, sorry, you were saying about your body weight, and
Yeah, yeah.
maybe you
So
can
so
get
I
down a
think
little bit leaner to unlock this.
we'll see. I'm still pretty far away, and like I said, we're definitely going to talk about like some like the heavy calisthenics stuff. I had recently Daniel, I think it's Bad now
Hmm.
from Fitness Facts or FAQs on with Jeffrey Schofield, and
Yeah.
I said to him, and we talked a little bit off air too. I was like, I'm looking at his, and he's very developed. I mean, he's a very
Yes.
lean, like 185 or whatever he is. So definitely more muscular than me. But when I asked him about our shoulder press strength, and I think on the podcast he said he had done 70 kilograms for 3 sets of 6. But then he made a post like a week or two later saying his PR was 70 kilograms for a set of 4. So I'm not sure where the discrepancy was for that. But either way, let's just say it's about 4 or 5. That is basically where I'm at right now. I could maybe do a little bit more. I just did 160 for like 8 to 10 on like a standard set. So
Yeah.
very comparable. But he said he could do 10 handstand push-ups. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but right now, literally, I can't do one supported, meaning like take the
Really?
balance out of it. Yeah, and I don't know if I'm just doing it in the wrong way because my shoulders are pretty strong. And I also thought Brian Borstein said that when he was doing CrossFit, he could do like 3 to 5 against the wall. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, but I mean, I think I could do maybe one. I could like gut out, but not like super deep. So I don't know if my technique is way off, my hands are not in the right place. But he said he could do 10 freestanding, like no balance. So I'm like, I gotta,
Freestanding, yeah,
yeah,
which
which
I
is crazy.
believe. I can usually when I'm well around this body weight, if I'm doing it fresh, 12, 15, touch and go, bouncy.
Are you
If
going
I'm
to
doing it,
your head or are you going like on parallettes?
so I do it with plyometric boxes, 12 inches high, and usually my head skins the ground in the bottom. So it's
So you're going deep.
I'm going very deep. I don't do on the floor. I could probably do like 20 reps.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
know, man. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here.
but what I would say is there might be I don't want to say motor unit recruitment deficit, but keep in mind Daniel started out as a calisthenics athlete first,
Yeah,
and he only started lifting and doing the overhead press many years later. So, he's so proficient that his freestanding performance is not that different from his wall support. It's kind of like
right,
how guys on the bench press have this perfect bar path after perfecting it for many years that when they then move on to the Smith machine variant, there's no performance difference, assuming the barbell weighs the same.
right.
It's the same that we see with Daniel. Now, in your case, it's the opposite. You lack this coordination, probably because you didn't do all the progressions, and that's why your body's just shutting off, is what I would suspect.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm
Your
gonna
body
keep
detects
working on it.
instability and then your force production goes down because you still have to stabilize with the wall support. And what I would ask you is which way are you facing the wall in the starting position before you kick yourself up?
Good
Where
question.
you at?
So I'm doing it where I'm facing away from the wall, which I think he has said is not a good way to train the balance component because then you get used to just being able to fall back to it. But
Hmm.
that's what I'm doing. So I am like basically straight up versus if I was facing the wall, then I could be a little bit more of like an incline, you know what I mean? As I press. But yeah, so I'm basically back to the wall, straight up and down.
Okay. So back to the wall, straight up and down. So if you were to record yourself, you would see your stomach basically.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I would recommend flipping the other way,
Okay.
which, yeah, because that's how you're going to build that progressive joint strength and it's going to give you more stability immediately. So, because a step before that would be the deficit pike push up.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure you're able to do that. I don't know if you've
Yeah, no,
experimented
easily,
with
like
those.
easily. And honestly, one day a week I'm doing a drop set where I do weighted decline push-ups and I'm on the fifth step. So the incline, I mean, people are watching, I'm probably
There
at
you
like,
go.
and
So I
I'm
think your body prefers pressing in that plane of motion, just like what we do with lifting. When you do it the other way, it just I don't find it's a natural way to press, man.
maybe. But yeah, so I'm
That's
doing,
how
what
I
am I,
feel
how
about
much weight am I doing? I'm doing 65 pounds added to me for, I have to go back and look, like 15 reps. At that incline. So you'd think like, okay,
it.
strip
Mhm.
off 65 pounds. I
I
should
know.
be able, so something's up there. I don't know. I got to figure that out because it doesn't match my other performances.
It's weird, but it's going to be harder being at your body weight as well in the 180s. Uh, like when I'm bear mode, I could probably do max 5 reps.
Hmm.
But if I'm deep into a workout, even a triple is difficult.
Yeah,
But again, I have shorter arms. You have longer legs, longer everything. So that's playing a role here. But
for
I
sure.
would I would try the other way and then
Well, that's why
progressively
he's
get
such an
more upright.
interesting. Yeah, I probably should start going the other way. And that's why Daniel is a very interesting comparison because we have
Yeah, but
very similar height and
but
all that stuff.
yeah, but it's not the right comparison because he was a calisthenics specialist. It's
Sure,
like
sure.
if someone, it's like there's certain moves that I learned very early on when I was 140 pounds, and I never lost that to this day.
Yeah,
It's, if you keep the skill in as you gain all that body weight and you stay relatively lean, and Daniel basically didn't have to bulk. He's been recomping the whole time, you could say, main gaining, if you
yeah,
will. You're going to retain that performance. So he was doing it when he was 160, 150, and he
sure.
just never let go of that. So I think that's the difference here, not necessarily
Well,
the height.
yeah, I mean, it gives me plenty of room to progress. Or kind of going back to the Candida thing, right? It's like, okay, now this is like a
Yeah.
new arc. Maybe I'm not going to put much muscle on, but I can do all this stuff. Are you able to do a
Oh,
front
yeah.
lever?
Can I do a front lever?
Yeah.
Yeah, 9 seconds.
9 seconds. Okay. Because
Yeah.
that's another thing. So I don't know how much we talked about core training, but I historically have like never done core training because I was like, oh, I've kind of got blocky abs. I don't want them even blockier. So I just never really did any core training.
Okay.
So going into it, I just flopped down, right? First time trying, I was
Yeah.
like, nothing. And then I was doing like 2 bands, and I could do that for like once I was like, okay, once I can get to a minute, I'll go to 1 band. And then I can do one
Hmm.
band for like 25, 30 seconds. So I actually, it's funny, like when I first did it 4 or 5 many, many years ago, I was like, you know what, I'm not going to jump to 4 or 5 for one. I'm just going to do my progression, 385 for five, the next week, 395 for five. So I waited until I could actually do it for like a full set. And I think I'm kind of going
Hmm.
to do that with the front lever. Like, I'm sure I could hold the front lever for like 3 seconds or something at this point, but I'm just going to wait until I get to like 30, 40 seconds with the 1 band, and then I'll take it away. But it's amazing how much harder it is than I would have expected because there's certain movements like a muscle up where, people like who don't know about lifting are like, oh wow, it's so impressive. And in reality, like if you have good
Hmm.
pull-up strength, you can kind of just flip yourself up. But,
Sure.
but then you look at a front lever, I don't think the average person seeing a front lever would think it's like that impressive. It's like, oh, you're just kind of hanging there. But it's to me infinitely harder than a muscle up. And I didn't realize
Yes.
how much back is involved just to, you're basically doing
Uh
like
huh. It's
like a
the
straight
body
arm
weight
pull
pullover.
down, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's humbling.
Yes, because the muscle up, you can kind of brute force it, and your leverages aren't that important. If you have the technique down, because your legs are straight down, right? You can just pull yourself over and you're good to go. Lots of heavy guys can do muscle ups. We've
Yeah,
seen this, people at 250 pounds knocking out sets like this, no problem. And it's a common lift in street calisthenics for a reason. The front lever, on the other hand, most guys who excel at it are very short and very light. And the reason is your leg length messes everything up. Like if you're
yeah,
6 feet, you're asking for problems, especially if you have a bodybuilding background or you're going to be a heavier body weight. It could be damn near impossible. So it requires, yeah, you can also brute force it with your lats, but you also have to be at the correct body weight to display that relative strength. It's kind of like the one arm pull up. You need to have a strong 1 rep max, but then you got to be light enough combined.
yeah,
It's like I
sure.
can't do a 1 arm pull up at, I don't know, 200 pounds, but I can do, let's say if I'm 160 pounds and I have 25 pounds hanging off my waist because the total load is still less, kind of thing.
Wow. So do you know what weight you can no longer do one? Have you like kind of tested that? Like in the
Mm.
180s?
No, the max I ever did a 1 arm pull up was at 178 body weight, and that was in 2021. So
Okay.
basically, I don't even bother to attempt it when I'm at a heavier body weight.
Wow.
I'm sure I could still do at least 1 rep at 185, but I don't see myself doing more than that.
Interesting.
But keep in mind, when I go down to 150, I can knock out 8 reps.
Wow.
So 35 pounds off my body weight basically almost gives me a 10 rep max. So that's how significant it is.
Yeah,
And
which
that's
is
why,
crazy.
again, yeah, but that's how it is in a lot of these calisthenics moves, including the planche. So the
Sure.
planche and the front lever, your leg length, in addition to your brute force and your body weight, that's the X factor. And the front
Yeah.
lever, it's all lats. Just
The reason
try
I
to, it's
say it's
more lats
crazy.
than abs.
Yes, well, yes, exactly. So the front lever, that's what I was just thinking too. How I was like, you're looking at this move and you're thinking, oh, it's all core, it's all core. It's really not. If you imagine that you had like a box under you or something, just to lift your legs up like that isn't actually very hard. It's to keep your whole body. It's like mostly lats. Um,
Yeah.
and the reason I say it's crazy, because of course, it's intuitive that, hey, the lighter you get, the easier these bodyweight movements are. In my experience, kind of surprisingly, because I'm at a point where if I bulk and cut, most of my movements don't, most of my exercises don't change in strength that dramatically at this point. Um,
Okay.
but with pull-ups, I get a little bit weaker in terms of the weight added to me as I go up, but not so much. I think again, I'm gaining strength as I get strong, I mean, as I get heavier.
Yes.
So, yes, I can't do as much, but it's not as much of a drop off as you would think. Same
Yep.
thing with like dips or weighted push-ups. Honestly, my strength, the amount of weight I added, I should say, went up slightly when dieting, like 30 pounds, but again, not as much as one would maybe expect. And I think you might have talked about this. There's kind of like an optimal weight
Yeah.
body fat where you can add the most or have the most net weight. What do you find that is for you for pull-ups?
Yeah. So it's very weird indeed, because when you get shredded, you're able to display your pure body weight performance in the best way possible. But then the external weight won't match what you could have done had you had 10 pounds of extra body fat on you, which
Hmm.
almost makes no sense.
Yeah.
And then this with the dips, it's like you won't retain the total number, but the external load can be rather similar. So it's like there's all these weird balance points. But to answer your question, my best body fat for weighted calisthenics is around 12 to 13%.
Yeah.
It's not 10%, it's not shredded. And I know because I look at the total weight on the bar and it's consistently higher when I have more body fat on me. And when I look at competitive street lifters, they're not shredded to the bone. They're just not. The best dippers tend to be around 15% body fat. And then
Mm.
the guys who are really good at pull ups, again, maybe 12%. I think it's because, some guys will say, like, if you're 200 pounds and you're repping 100 pounds, then that's the same thing as a 150-pound guy repping 150.
Hmm.
On paper, yeah, but let's be honest. The guy who's doing one times body weight, or in this case, double, if you want to quantify like that, that is more impressive, and it's probably harder to do. It's not really equal.
Right.
It's like these because I've seen, I use that argument to empower people who are bulked up. Like you can get a great stimulus without having to shred down. You can compare your numbers to mine in that way, but it's not the same. So where I'm getting at is if we're just looking at the total weight on the bar, the guys who have the biggest numbers, it's also because they're not the lightest.
Right.
But that doesn't hold true for the external weight. So you could
Yeah.
have a guy who's 150 and he's doing a 300-pound dip, but the total on that is less than someone who's in the 200s who you know
Yeah, like
is
you'd
lifting
think like
less.
so basically if you're just looking at the body weight performance, basically the lighter you are, the better, the leaner you are, the better. I mean, maybe you could make an exception when you're like stupidly lean, but basically the leaner you are, the more you could rep out, let's say body weight pull-ups. But then,
Yes.
yeah, once you had the external load, you would think the combined body weight and external weight would still be best at higher body weights because at that point you're considering those higher body weights. But I don't know, like there is this kind of weird Like you said, it
It's
doesn't quite add
it's
up.
strange, and maybe it's internal leverages. That's a possible mechanism, maybe getting more squish out of certain things. But like when you analyze, which I could see making sense for the weighted dip because you have more cushion around your arms, So even though the stopping point doesn't change, for example, on a bench press, you have more thickness from your chest and your
Yeah,
back,
yeah,
so
yeah.
the range of motion is literally reduced, and you can arch more into it, and you can modify that. But with a dip, there's none of that. It's going to be the same range of motion on paper, whether you're bulked or shredded, right?
Yep.
But again, that's on paper because when you're bulked up, your mobility might be a little bit worse. You might be more squishy. So your range of motion might also be like your terminal range of motion might be different just because you're a bigger guy. Or if it's not, assuming it's the same exact joint angles, again, you have bigger arms, you have more cushion out of the bottom. It's like you have natural elbow wraps. And
Sure.
maybe there's something going on with intramuscular fat that's helping with the leverages. Uh, so for that, it makes sense. Maybe for the pull-ups, you could say that because the dead hang involves your chest a bit more, and then you have a bit more fat in your chest that it's helping you out. We don't know what the reason is,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
what I can tell you is that you're not going to have the best total weight at your most shredded body weight. That's what my years of experience has taught me in specializing in weighted pull-ups, weighted dips, going up and down in body weight. It's just not happening, and that's why if I do get this 5-plate pull-up, I can promise you that the total weight's not going to be more than when I got that 210 or even 200 pounds. It's deception. It's like the external load's on there, but the total weight isn't.
So, well, what do you think? So if it's not going to be more than you did the 210, you think you're going to have to be 15 pounds lighter?
Sorry. What I mean is like if I'm 160 doing 210 pounds
Yeah.
externally, okay? Uh yeah, basically that's what I'm saying, yeah. I'll have to be like 145 kind of thing, but it'll still be the same
Interesting. But then
total
wouldn't
load.
that counter what your point was about how you're strongest at a slightly higher body fat
No, I'm
then?
not I'm not stronger. It's just the total number is the same. It's just externally it's a little bit higher, but the total weight is not. So therefore I'm not stronger.
Yeah, no, I get so maybe stronger. Stronger gets confusing, I think, in a conversation like this because some people get to consider stronger the external weight only, whereas obviously you could interpret it as, total. Although I still think the total weight you're actually pulling up is going to be most at like if you did 145 pounds body weight and you
Yeah.
lifted 225, you're
Yeah.
for sure lifting slightly more than 160 and 210 because the arm weight I think is gonna like when you've lost 15 pounds of body weight, a small amount of that is coming from your arm. I mean, again, we're talking minuscule. So maybe the amount of your body weight that you're lifting is down 14 pounds, not 15, but the weight
Mhm.
you've added has gone up 15 pounds. So the total weight you're actually pulling up might be like 1 pound more. Does that make sense? Because you're not
Kind
lifting
of.
your forearm weight and everything. So maybe,
Yeah,
yeah. So
but
again, minuscule difference, but
I I don't think it would make a big difference. I think more so the difference would be that if you get down to that super low body weight, which is not my goal, again, this is just a hypothetical example,
yeah,
that you risk losing muscle mass.
right, for sure.
Uh, so, then I guess we could make the argument that if somehow you're still able to lift that amount, then technically you're stronger because you were able to maintain your muscle or actually gain muscle somehow, being at
Yeah.
that lighter body weight. You know what? It's a bad example.
It would be
All I
interesting
was
though
trying
to
to say is
see.
that there's a sweet spot, and sometimes the external weight can be a little bit deceiving if the total weight hasn't really budged that much. Like for me to say like I made some really good gains, it would have to be like okay, I cut down to 155, so 2 pounds down from here, and then I get my two plates. Now
For sure.
that's respectable. But that I'm
For
gonna
sure.
cut down to like this very low body fat, and I'm like, look how much stronger I got. I don't
Yeah.
think so. I think the strength was already there, and I just managed to preserve. somewhere in
Yeah, I
it.
totally
You know?
agree with that. It's still super impressive either way, but I totally agree with that. So let's say, because I mean, realistically, you're probably not going to want to go down to 145. I think 150, 155 is realistic. So like, what do you think
Sure.
you're going to do to get those 15 pounds? Because it's a pretty lofty goal, right, at this point.
Yeah, it's an insane goal, if I'm being honest. I didn't think I was ever gonna get close to this. But the same methods that I used to get 210. And for that, it's simply going to be incorporating the max effort method on a variety of weighted pull-ups, followed by back down sets, and just trusting that process. So the way it works is you hit a top single on any variation, it doesn't matter what it is, and then you do 2 sets of 4 to 6 or 5 to 8. It could be top set back down, or it could be straight double progression or dynamic double progression. And you rotate that specific hypertrophy work every 3 weeks or so. This way, you never run into overuse, which is a big problem on pull ups, might I add, specifically for golfer's elbow. If you don't rotate often when you're lifting 200 pounds, trust me, it adds up. So you rotate, and then you make sure the variations are very difficult so that you optimize the stimulus fatigue ratio and address your weaknesses. And in my case, it's typically using wider grip variations because that's what I suck at. So the medium grip is a strong position to be in. I think most guys excel at that,
Hmm.
whether it's neutral, underhand, or pronated. But the super wide, it's like everybody sucks at it.
Yeah.
So that's an easy grip that you can take advantage of. And I said it before, but when I started doing those, it gave me my second wave of lat puberty. And it's crazy because I never believed in it because back in the day, everyone said that you had to pull narrow for lats.
Right.
And I remember when I heard Leroy Colbert talk about it for the first time, saying that after 70 years of lifting, because he started at like 10 years old, he said there was nothing like the wide grip pull up. For some reason, that still didn't click with me. It didn't sit right because of all the information I heard saying that it was a trash movement.
Yeah.
But when I
Well,
started
back
doing it,
way back, people
yeah,
said it would make your lats wider. And then it
yes,
was the, hey, actually, no, like the pullback from that was the narrow. But then now you're feeling like, no, actually, it is kind of
yeah,
like the original guy said.
but what I would say is my actual take after really thinking about all this stuff is that you're going to get the best results with the extreme grip that you didn't do. So my experience could have been the exact same if I started off with super wide and then I transitioned to the narrow. So it's not that this. So you see how this nuance. It's not how this was some magical exercise necessarily. It's that I
Yeah.
never trained super wide. So there's no magic. It kind of is for me. It felt like magic, but
Yeah.
it's so if you know it's train your opposite grip. That's my number one tip for guys who are trying to improve their pull up. And for me, I could do 140 pounds on the super wide grip pull up for 1 rep.
Nice.
There's a very big difference. We're talking over 60 pounds lost. So
Yeah.
when I'm doing my normal sets and reps, like I'm getting a lot of stimulation with almost a fraction of the load. So that goes a long way for fatigue management. But the
Still,
training
yeah.
is nothing complicated.
Yeah. And sorry, how many days a week are you training pull-ups?
Right now, I'm training them like kind of like a Jordan Peters split. So push pull off, legs off, repeat. So it's like every 5 days. And the
Hmm.
5 days I found to be an absolute game changer for recovery because
Wow.
of the weights that I'm lifting. I've done every 72, which is still doable on pull ups. I just find that it can lead to golfer's elbow. And
Hmm.
that's something that I've been more prone to in recent times. So that's why I prefer not to abuse max effort frequency on pull
Interesting.
ups.
And so you're only doing 3 sets for pull-ups every 5 days? Is it's the main set and then the two back
Uh,
off sets?
I would say maybe 4. So there's 3 max effort singles.
Oh,
So
okay.
that
Three
goes
max.
a long
Okay.
way. Usually it's 3, like 90, 95, 100%, or 85, 90, 95, right? And this is something
Okay.
that you just feel out. So the way that might look like is you take, well, first you do, I'll describe the whole thing if you want me to.
Sure. Yeah.
So you do some body weight pull ups, knock out 5 reps, throw on a 45-pound plate. 5 reps, 95 for 3, then 135 for 3. Then you throw on double tens, so 155, hit that for a single. Then you go 170 for a single. Then you do 185, and then you can choose if you're going to hit anything more, which can be like 5 to 10 pound jumps, depending on the variation. But usually, if you pick the hard version, even that, what I described, that could be the training, But if you're going to pick a stronger grip, then you go from 185 to 192 ish. Then you could try to take 200 or 205, but it's like you got to make smaller jumps past the 4 plate mark. So that's the max effort. Then you do the
Okay.
back down sets. So just 2 sets of two back down sets, and then you can throw on one more, which is just a harder variation. I just defaulted behind the neck because it again slashes me down. So in total, you have like 3 sets, if 3 hard sets with the 3 singles, and then you do your lat pull down and a row, 2 sets each.
Okay. So basically, you got your pull-ups, and then, I mean, really, you're looking at maybe like 8 work sets or so. Although I do want to point out, when you were talking about, because I think if somebody were to think of like any normal movement, let's say a barbell row, and your one rep
Mm.
max was 200 pounds, then yes, 135 for 3, pretty easy, 155 for 3 or for 1, pretty easy. And you probably only think, hey, the 175 and the 185 are kind of hard. But just for people listening, just keep in mind, like this is added weight. So if we just do 155
Yeah.
pounds body weight plus 135 pounds, so that's 290. So compared to if he was going to do a 1 rep max of 155 pounds body weight and 200 pounds, that's 355. So that 290 as a percentage is 82%. So even though like the
Mm-hmm.
135 for 3 is still 82% for 3, and that might be a 7 rep max or something like that. So the point is that there's still that stimulation there, you know,
Yep.
95 for 2, 135 for 3, whatever, and then 155. So I'm not saying that's like a really hard working set for Alex, but I am saying that there is purpose behind it for one, but two, there's
Yep.
still a stimulation there. So you
No,
could
you're
argue this
absolutely right.
is, nine,
Like
but yeah.
this is a great point. So even if you were to do like 5 sets of 3 with 135, assuming it's an 8 rep max or whatever, that's a lot of stimulation,
Mhm.
especially if you're proficient at the movement. So you are getting some effective reps in there. And I also want to point out that the max effort singles with that overload, those are effective reps. Is it inefficient? You damn right it's inefficient for sure, but it still counts. So if that 135 triple, let's say you got, I don't know, 1 effective rep in, okay? And then you got your 3 max effort singles. Well, we got 4 effective reps now. So doesn't that fall into hypertrophy guidelines? They say the hypertrophy rep range is 4 to 35. It takes that. And that's why there's the new craze about the 4 to 8 rep range. Well, I got 4 reps with a crazy overload, so it counts. And then you do your 2 back down sets. Uh, so the volume is higher than you think.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about these absolute loads that are inherently more fatiguing.
Right, right. So I mean, realistically, pull-ups, depending on how you're counting it, let's call it like 5 or 6 working sets, and then 2 for rows and 2 for the lat pull down. So I mean, you're really
Yeah,
doing about 9 to 10 sets for back every 5 days. So, I don't know, maybe like 13, 14 per week on average, right?
it's hard
Sounds
to
about right.
quantify.
Yeah,
Yeah, max 12 or so. But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
and again, this is for base building. When I'm peaking, I'll cut out the lat pull downs. I'll just do pull-ups and rows. And I can honestly say that's how I developed most of the strength.
But you'll do more pull-ups.
Not even, no. I'll
You're
just
just you're just
I'll
taking away the
just
lat
cut
pull
out the
downs.
lat pull downs just to reduce my fatigue a bit,
Hmm.
and that's it.
Oh,
But you
interesting.
can't. I found that after a month of training that way, you'll start to move backwards. That's been my experience. So I do think the lat pull down is an important addition when you're doing these kinds of volumes.
Interesting. Okay. Because I mean, most people tend to do more volume overall for back. So where are you falling these days in terms of overall set volume for chest, for biceps, for legs?
God, so I'm on the lower end for basically everything. And for the legs, I'm super low volume. If
Hmm.
I'm being 100%, and this is going to be the first podcast where I'll announce this, but I do one set per exercise when it comes to legs. And
Wow.
that does me just fine. So I'll do a Hatfield squat, one set with 500 pounds, then a good morning, one set with 405. Then I'll do one set of belt squats, again, 405, one set of Nordic leg curls, actually, maybe two on that. Then I'll do one set of pendulum sissy squats, one set of weighted sit ups. Boom, we're done. So legs, I'm getting like three sets of quads per workout, and posterior chain, 3 sets. And that's every 5 days.
Yeah.
But I've also done once a week with that setup, and it's been fine. So I'm like
Hmm.
at the bottom of the barrel volume for legs.
Have you lost
For
any strength in your legs since cutting volume that low?
Nope, I've actually maintained most of it doing that. I squatted my normal loads last night, and I was just fine. So it's been enlightening to say the least.
Yeah,
I didn't
sure.
think it was possible, but I recovered better. And I think it's because of the absolute load. That is the X factor in all this shit. And the same thing for the upper body. Uh, I find that it's not my chest recovery, but my shoulder recovery is garbage.
Hmm.
Uh, so I've taken my pressing volume down quite a bit. Uh, I'm like, I'll do two sets of, let's say, two sets of Larson press, two sets of dips, one set of chest crusher. And that's about the most that I can tolerate
Okay.
for my chest.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm going to be having Brian Borstein and Aaron Straker on next week. And Brian has really dramatically cut his volume at this point. Like he's doing a couple sets per body part per week. I forget the exact
Mhm.
split. And he's like, I'm honestly the strongest that I've been on a lot of these movements. And it's really fascinating because a lot of people who I have worked with as clients, I think part of the reason they've come to me is they know that I often start with low volume. But it doesn't mean I only do low volume. I'll just start people on low volume. We'll see how, how they progress and whatnot. But my general consensus has been I've done high volumes and I don't really notice much of a difference with it.
Mhm.
But if you had a gun to my head and you said, "Hey, I need you to get as big of arms as possible in the next year," I would bump the volume up. If you said I had to get the biggest one rep max bench, I would be doing a significant frequency at the very least. Obviously, there's a neurological component. So I actually plan to make a video at some point on like peaked versus general strength.
Sure.
And there's obviously a lot that can go into that, but it's just interesting, and I kind of just wonder if it's just something I notice again more of an adaptation, like I because I think it's mostly a neural thing. I don't think I'm gaining a lot of size, but I've noticed that hey, I'm calves. Okay, I bump up to like 15 sets per week or something like that, and I see like the slightest bump in strength, no change in size. Could just be that I'm getting used to these things. But
Mm.
overarching for hypertrophy, I haven't seen much of a difference, and I can't stress how many times I've heard you, Brian, myself, so many people where it's like, let me just try super low volume, and it's like, oh, it was fine.
Yeah. And keep in mind, it's the people who make these changes, it's typically later on in
Right.
their journey. So this isn't to say that I didn't do a lot of volume earlier on. I certainly did, especially in my calisthenics days. People have seen the crazy amount of sets that I did. Like I was known for having very high work capacity. Same thing with my
Mm,
full body workouts. Like I followed silver era guidelines, but at some point that kind of training just became unsustainable and not superior. And regarding like gun to your head, if you add more volume, are you going to make better gains? Would I personally pull that card? And my response nowadays would be no, because I think I would just end up with more joint pain. So I would just, because my recovery would be compromised, I wouldn't even bother trying it. And sure, maybe you can milk out those gains for a short term block. Like if someone wants to do the small off squat program,
yeah,
but you're going to be hurting for months after that. And the moment you stop training that way, you're going to lose the gains.
right.
So I view it as irrelevant because no one is going to train that way long term. And it's the same thing with these splits that have you in the gym constantly. That fatigue is adding up on a day-to-day basis, and you can only train that way for so long. Heck, I even tried doing this with a 5-day bro split. which your muscles are getting hit once a week. But I'll tell you, at some point, you start feeling that. You start feeling like garbage. Even though your muscles got a full week to recover, there's just that constant pounding on your body. So I think
So this
fatigue
was a high
management,
volume bro split.
not even, not even, bro. And it was still difficult to recover from because you're constantly in the gym. So I feel like recovery is not emphasized enough. And there's many layers to it. It's not just volume, it's also frequency. It's also how often you're going in the gym. I find that most guys, after like 4 days of being in the gym per week, it starts to be diminishing returns. And the volume, after about 6 to 8 sets on a workout, it's like it's starting to look junky. I don't think you could do that more than like twice a week and see like that much better gains. And that's personally where I would cut it off.
Yeah.
Like, if gun to my head, if I want to really maximize my gains, for one, I would be in a calorie surplus. I don't care what anybody says. I would even go more aggressive. I would do a 500 calorie surplus, 8 sets of muscle, and that's it. Done twice a week, every 72 hours. Boom. That's as optimal as it's going to get. But I wouldn't be able to train that way forever. And I certainly can't do it now.
Right. Well, I was going to
Nowadays,
say,
I'm
though, but
training.
that's, yeah, so,
Yeah.
so 16 sets or a little more, if it's every
16
3 days.
sets. That's, to me, that's the upper end of the volume range.
Yeah.
It's not 20. I would not do 20.
Yeah.
And
No, I agree with you. I
and I
agree.
wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody said, family's life depends on it, I'd say, all right, yeah, we're not doing a 1 to 200 calorie surplus, right? If it's like net muscle mass, yeah, probably 500 or something like that. I mean, obviously, if you're literally just looking at like maximum muscle mass, then you would just eat as much as possible because, but if it wasn't like you had to get back down to the same body fat at the end, which we could talk about Jeff Nevert's experiment at some point too. But
Mhm.
but yeah, but like that's the
Sure.
thing. Like I think that 12 to 15 sets, because I don't do anything close to that right now. I mean, per week right
Sure.
now, legs, so hamstrings. Well, I just started doing myo reps recently, which I'm actually really enjoying. But like probably 6 to 8 for quads and hams, 6 to 8 for calves. Yeah, most of them are 6 to 8, other than like back. But yeah, I would pretty much never be going above 12 to 15. Um,
Mhm.
and even that, like this past January, I was doing my upper power days were a total of 24 work sets in the whole, and these are all straight sets. And
Mhm.
eventually, I was just like, bro, like this is taking me almost 2 hours, and it's just annoying. So I
Yeah.
cut everything down. So it was 3 straight sets for 8 exercises. I cut that down
That's
to
a
two
lot.
straight sets. It is a lot. I cut that down to 2 straight sets, literally zero negative impact in any regard at all. Other than the only impact was I
Yeah.
enjoyed the workout more.
But that's the
Um,
thing. So it's like,
yeah,
how much better is it? And if you take it down and you're still making good progress, why not gravitate towards that?
yeah,
Again, it's me with the legs. I didn't think I would make gains this good at 1 set per exercise. But the reason why I did it, well, one, I'm lazy. I don't like training my legs. It's annoying.
yeah.
So I'm like, let me try this minimum effective dose. And lo and behold, the gains are, I would say, at least 80% comparable. Is it better if I do 2 sets? Probably, but it's not a deal breaker.
Just to
So for that
clarify,
reason, I'm just gonna do 1 set. Forget, screw it.
when you say
So
the gains are 80% comparable, you mean you're still gaining, it's just a little slower? Not that you've gone to 80% of your size and strength before.
no, no, that's what I'm saying. Is just maybe a slightly slower progression
Yeah,
on certain
okay.
things, but
I just
it's
wanted to
very
clarify for people
comparable. I don't
listening
think most
there.
people would be able to tell or notice a difference. It's not like I'm getting the stimulus from that 1 set, so
Yeah.
that's why I'm defaulting to it.
Yeah, I,
So
I think at some point, I don't have a reason to not try this other than maybe there's just like a little like fear in the back of my mind or something. Also, to be fair, I do like training, and now that I have the home gym, like I sometimes have to
yeah, of
prevent
course.
myself from going down there because I'm like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this. So I'll still keep doing the calisthenics stuff, but like there's a part of me that wants to see like, okay, literally, what if you just did one upper, one lower per week,
Mhm.
2 work sets per body part? Like, would you even lose anything? And I've never gone that low across the board. I went very low on legs for a 6 month trial. You maybe heard me talk about this, but it wasn't a fair volume assessment. It's hard to know. One leg did just
Oh yeah.
isolation, and the other did isolation with leg press. And after the 6 months, there was a half an inch difference, which is very substantial. Was that because one had a lot less volume, or because it was only doing isolation? I don't know the answer to that. Obviously, you can't know. Um,
Mm,
but I'm just, and even then, you could make an argument from a lifestyle standpoint. Who gives a shit if your thighs are half an inch smaller? Now, I'm not okay with that, but I'm just saying for 95% of people, if it like just to say that you can maintain on a lot less. But anyway, yeah, I mean, Brian,
yeah,
I'd be interested to talk to Brian about how low he's gone.
yeah. And you have natural asymmetries as well,
Yeah,
especially with things like the arms. Some guys, it is half an inch difference,
yeah.
or at
Well,
least a
I
quarter
measured
inch.
before I did this, but yes, you're right.
Sure. Yeah. But like if your legs are already jacked, like I don't know, let's say they're 25, one of them is 25 inches, the other one's 24 and a half. No one's gonna be able to tell.
No, no,
So it's at the end of the day, it's just an arbitrary measurement in that sense.
yeah.